But on behalf of West Virginia University and the athletic coaching education major, this is case 256, and I'm Dr. King, and with us today on the Hangout is Jim Thompson, the founder and CEO of the Positive Coaching Alliance. He got up super early. It's just turned 5 a.m. there and on the West Coast, so we are blessed and very grateful to have Jim join us today. As we discussed, the kind of format for today is you have some time, give us your opening statement and kind of maybe cover in that what's been going on since the publication of the Double Bowl Coach book, and then I'll follow on with that for a few minutes, and then we will open it up to questions from the A students here at WVU. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, take it away.
So first of all, Rock, I'm sorry, Dr. King, I don't want to be too familiar with you. You've been a friend for a long time, been one of our best trainers, Positive Coaching Alliance. I'm happy to get up early. I get up early anyway. Usually don't have to have a shower and get dressed up nicely by 5 o'clock in the morning. But I'm happy to do it and excited to talk with you all. I'm going to just lay out a few things about Positive Coaching Alliance as a movement. First of all, youth sports is a major institution in this country. We don't think of it as a major institution because it's so decentralized. But there are 40 million kids playing youth sports. I got a meeting a couple days ago in Los Angeles with a very wealthy businessman who's an owner of a professional team, and you know, he's coached his 4 boys and 2 daughters for 18 years, and he had all over his office. He had symbols of business deals he had done, and he's totally into youth sports. It's just an incredibly important institution that has not gotten the attention it deserves, and it's an underperforming institution. There's what we call the entertainment sports model. Professional sports, big-time college sports, leads to a win-at-all-cost mentality, and that filters down all the way to 6-year-olds playing t-ball. Like you got dads fighting with each other at a t-ball game. There was a girls' basketball game, I think, in Minnesota recently, where 40 parents went out and started fighting with each other on the floor. So that entertainment sports culture, that win-at-all-cost mentality, is really harmful to our society. We talk about national security, and got 1,000 bases all around the world to protect our national security. Well, if we're not producing the right kind of people, our national security is going to be harmed also. And sports is the very best place to do that. So our answer to the entertainment sports culture is what we call a development zone culture, where the goal is to develop better athletes, better people. It's not that winning's not important. Trying to win is important. Being competitive. I'm in Northern California right now, and I like granola, but I'm a very competitive person. Competition is a good thing, and learning to compete is an important skill. It's just that there's something much more important going on than just the outcome of a game. Phil Jackson, our national spokesperson, one of the winningest coaches ever, who's experiencing a different reality now as the president of the New York Knicks, once said, not only is there more to life than basketball, there's more to basketball than basketball. And if all kids are learning in sports as a sport, as opposed to the life lessons that it can be taught, then we're missing something. Positive Coaching Alliance, what we call our secret sauce. How are we effective? We've had 65 staff around the country, of more than 120 trainers doing workshops. We did 1,600 live workshops last year. Had 50,000 people go to our online training. We're growing like crazy. I think our secret sauce comes down to 3 things. One is the best research from sports psychology and other disciplines. What do sports psychologists do with the top athletes in the world to get them to perform well? There's no reason in the world that youth coaches can't learn those same strategies. So we take the best knowledge from sports psychology and other disciplines. We take the best practices of some of the greatest coaches in the world, and we combine that with the endless of teachable moments that sports provide. There is, no matter what happens in every practice, in every game, there is a teachable moment, multiple ones. You win a close game, you lose a close game. Teachable moments. You win a blowout, you get blown out. Teachable moments. No matter what's going on, there are things that coaches and parents who are character educators can use. Talk a little bit about our organizational model. About 7 years ago, we launched our first chapter in Houston. A chapter requires seed funding. Then we recruit a local board of influential people. I was just telling Dr. King earlier, I was in LA on Monday, and we got the COO of the Lakers, Tim Harris, and the president of the LA Sparks, the NBA team, to join our Los Angeles chapter board. I was in New York a couple of weeks before that, and the New York Knicks committed seed funding for a New York chapter. Allen Houston, who was a shooting guard, went to University of Tennessee and a shooting guard for the Knicks, joined our national advisory board. So our chapter model is working very well. We have 11 chapters. We're about to launch our 12th one in Hawaii. The Trailblazers and the Timbers, the Major League Soccer franchise in Portland, are seed funders for Portland. We'll be opening that soon. And the Lakers and the Galaxy MLS team in LA are seed funders for LA. So we're getting a lot of support and expanding rapidly. We also have an online resource, and Rock, I don't know if you've introduced your students to this, but it's called the PCA devzone.org. That's the website, PCAdevzone.org.
It'll actually be the first class when we return from spring break.
Okay. If any of you know about WebMD, WebMD is it's about 1.7 million people a day who, I've got this mole on my arm. Is it cancer? I've got this pain in my back. What's the problem? They go to WebMD to find out before they go to a doctor. PCAdevzone.org is we believe is going to be the equivalent of WebMD. We've only launched it a few months ago. We had 100,000 unique visitors last month, and it's growing like crazy. So if you're an athlete and you've got a problem, I'm injured and I don't know how to deal with that injury, you can go to PCAdevzone.org and we'll have resources for you. If you're a fan of any of the coaches or athletes who are on our National Advisory Board, you can go and Doc Rivers. There's a ton of videos from Doc Rivers talking about, for example, when you coach your own kid, and which is kind of interesting because he is coaching his own kid right now. His son Austin got traded to the Clippers recently. So any issue you have in youth sports, we either have some resources, the best experts in the country to address that, or we'll generate information if there's a new problem that comes up. We got a 5-year plan. That plan will put us in 3 new chapters a year, leading to 26 or 27 in 5 years from now. Our goal is to reach 20 million of the 40 million kids that play high school and youth sports in the year 2020. 20 million in 2020. So let me just stop there. They say we're creating a movement to change, to transform really a major institution in this country, which is high school and youth sports. Brock, I'll stop there.
Okay, very good. I think I'm going to start with probably a question that you get pretty regularly, and that is the role or the impact of the Positive Coaching Alliance beyond the youth sport model. So with how effective or what has been your experience with elite sport, top-end collegiate athletes, professional leagues, things along those lines?
Well, our focus is, in the nonprofit world, there's something called mission creep. And mission creep happens when somebody has some money and they want you to do something that doesn't really fit with your mission. Our mission is high school and youth sports, 18-year-olds and below, basically. But we found that a lot of colleges and universities, you know, a 21-year-old college athlete in some ways isn't that different from a 17-year-old high school athlete. And the challenges they face are similar. So we've recently done workshops for coaches and athletes at Harvard, at Yale, working with people at Tufts. I did a workshop for the coaches at the University of Hawaii. So we will respond to the university level when they ask for it. The other thing is that when I talk to business people and professional athletes, professional coaches, and I explain our model for how when I talk to them about what we encourage coaches to do, they say that's how I coach. If you look at some of the best coaches, Phil Jackson, Doc Rivers, I'm a big fan of Brad Stevens. I think that the Celtics are trying to tank so they can get a really good draft choices, and they trade away all their good players, and Brad Stevens continues to find ways for them to win. And I think they're a half game out of the 8th. They won like 5 in a row, and then there are other coaches like Lindsay Gottlieb, who is the women's coach at Cal, who I think is just one of the greatest coaches ever. I was watching a major college. It was an ACC game on TV recently, and there was a call that went against one of the teams, and the coach, a very well-known coach who I will not name here, was upset with the coach, and the camera panned on his face. He looked so ugly. He was so angry, and it looked like he was going to have a heart attack. And he was screaming. And later that night, I watched Cal play Stanford for the championship of the Pac-12, and the call. And I'm a Stanford alum, and I'm a big fan of Cal. So I was like, whoever wins, I'm going to be happy. Whoever loses, I'm going to be sad. There was a call that I thought was a really bad call against Cal, and Lindsay Gottlieb went like this. It was like she didn't like the call, but she is the kind of coach that managed the game and did not. I'm sure she talked to the officials in a break to say, "Hey, what did you see there?" But another coach I really admire in the Big 12, right?
Yes.
So it's Fred Hoiberg at Iowa State. There was a fantastic piece in ESPN.com a couple days ago about him when they won the Big 12 conference, and he came off the bench, and there was this little circle about this big of dampness in his back. And they were talking about how other coaches are sweating like, you know, and he's just calm and cool, and never gets negative with his players. They asked his players, "Is he? You know, you were 17 points down." This I think it was against North Carolina, and they said, "Oh, you know, coaches taught us that, you know, we'll come back." And they asked his kids, "Does your dad ever lose his temper at home?" They said, "Never." This positive approach that we talk about gets results. That was a long-winded answer, and I'm not even sure I answered your question, Rock.
Well, I think that you got the number of names that the students recognized per minute was really high, so that was well done. All right, so thanks with that. The next follow-up that I have is that what have you seen change in the response to the message from PCA since you started?
Well, I mean, the first thing when you start a new organization, the first thing you have to have is credibility. Why should anybody pay attention to Positive Coaching Alliance 17 years ago? So we had to develop credibility. I had written a book called Positive Coaching. I was working at the Stanford Business School, so those are two areas of credibility. Phil Jackson got involved with this right away. But the reality is most people don't know who you are. And so when you have a conversation, say, "Oh, no, I've never heard of Positive Coaching Alliance before." Now we're rarely in that situation. We still are, but not very often. So when I met with Tim Harris, the COO of the Lakers on Monday, this is the second meeting. One of my staff had met with him before. He knew all about us. Of course, Phil Jackson, still very tied to the Lakers, even though he's with the Knicks now. But we're just getting the conversations flow a lot easily, or more easily. And we've had impact. So people have seen that. Steve Young is on our national advisory board, and he first heard about Positive Coaching Alliance because his kids were playing Little League in Palo Alto. And he had seen the bad, and his kids were coached by coaches who had been trained by us to be positive, and he really liked it. And now he's one of our biggest advocates.
Very good. I think at this point, it's see who's camera. Go ahead, fire away. What's your question for Mr. Thompson?
What are some of the challenges when trying to compare a win-at-all-cost coach to a double coach?
What are the challenges of winning?
What are the challenges of converting a win-at-all-cost coach to a double goal coach?
It's actually not as hard as you would think. Phil Jackson, he gave a talk years ago for Positive Coaching Alliance, and he said that the second game he coached in the NBA, he was thrown out of the game. He led the league in technical fouls that year. But he figured out very quickly that that negative approach that he had been coached with, in many cases, didn't work. Our material is research-based. It's double goal, so it's not just about developing better people. It's about developing better athletes and winning on the scoreboard. You get better results from coaching for mastery rather than coaching to win on the scoreboard, for example. So the many coaches, come around when they understand it, but we don't count on that. That's why we take a systems approach. We look at youth sports as an ecosystem where the leaders, coaches, parents, athletes all need to get on the same page. And we work with the leaders of an organization. Bob Bowlesby, for example, who's the commissioner of the Big 12, is one of our biggest supporters. And we're talking with him about an alliance between Positive Coaching Alliance and the Big 12. When the leaders of an organization, let's say a Little League program, create a culture where positive coaching is rewarded and win-at-all-cost coaching is not, then people come around. Now, there are some coaches who should not be working with kids. They're not going to be able to change. And Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, one of the top business books ever written, uses a metaphor of a bus. You're going to have a great organization. You have to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats on the bus. There's some coaches that just need to get off the bus. You need to move them out of your organization because they're just never going to be good working with kids.
Thank you. Let me, actually, you brought up a question that I wanted to ask. When you talked about the Jim Collins and the bus metaphor and from good to great, I just saw something about Huggy Rao, who's co-author with Bob Sutton and their books, Scaling to Excellence. They had a slightly different take, or maybe it actually fits very nicely with that idea of getting people off of the bus. And then Huggy has joined the movement in some way. Fill us in on that.
Yeah, Huggy, he is an Indian professor at Stanford Business School, and his full first name is something like Hayagravia or something like that, but he goes by Huggy. He's actually kind of a warm, cozy guy also. The research that backs up scaling up excellence fits very well with Jim Collins' work. For example, one of the things he says is you need to look for people who are energy raisers. In fact, we actually have a video of Brad Stevens recorded at a PCA event a while back on PCADevZone.org, where he talks about are you the kind of person, he was talking to high school athletes, he said, are you the kind of person, when you come into a room, you increase the level of energy? Or are you the kind of person who decreases it? Most of us, Brad Stevens said, are the kind of people who, we don't change the energy level. We come onto a team, we come into a classroom, and the energy level stays the same. And what you're looking for, if you really want to have a fantastic organization, are the people who, when they come into a room, they raise the energy of everybody else. we talk about a triple impact competitor, someone who makes himself better, or teammates better, and the game better by the way he or she competes. And that second piece about making your teammates better, we say that's what leadership is. Leadership is when you make the people around you better. And one big way of doing that is through what we call filling people's emotional tank. Everybody has an emotional tank like the gas tank of a car. If you're going on a long trip, you got to fill up, and you got to fill up again and again and again to get there. If you're playing in a season or a team, it's a long journey, and your emotional tank needs to be filled again and again and again. And this goes back to Cameron's question earlier about win at all cost coaches. Win at all cost, really negative coaches compensate for that by typically having an assistant coach who comes along after the head coach blasts them publicly and totally drains their tank, and the coach comes along, the assistant coach comes along and says, hey, it's okay, he really loves you, he's the reason he's so hard on you is because he loves you, and try to undo that. But the very best coaches are tank fillers, and Brad Stevens' advice and Huggy Rao's research says be the kind of person who raises the energy in a group you're in, you're going to be successful in life.
Corey here today? All right, Corey, fire away, nice and loud.
When it comes to coaching an athlete, many coaches believe in breaking them down, building them up. Do you believe in this as well? If not, what is your method of developing athletes?
Yeah, no, not at all. There's no research to show. There's no research to show that breaking players down, breaking people down to build them up works. The research all goes in the other direction. Now, Bart Conner and Nadia Comaneci. And you folks are maybe too young to know who Nadia was. Bart was the early American gymnast who won an early gold medal. Nadia from Romania is the greatest women's gymnastic ever. Her coach was Bella Caroli, a Romanian coach, who's now part of the U.S. gymnastics coaching staff. Nobody would say that Bella Caroli is a positive coach. And what Bart told me once is that it didn't matter what kind of a coach Nadia had. He was so mentally tough that she could succeed no matter what kind of coach she had. The question we have to ask ourselves is, how many Nadias do we have on our team? How many of us are Nadias? Almost none of us are. We respond when people fill our tanks, when they encourage us, when they make us feel like an important part. Mary Fry's research at the University of Kansas on how you build strong team culture. The three things are when members of the team feel respected. I can't remember the second one, but the third one's the one that gets me. When they believe that their coach believes in them. When your coach believes in you, you just do better. So, the coaches who say, I'm really hard on my team and I'm going to break them down to build them back up. First of all, a lot of them are bullies who really like, lording it over other people. They compensate, as I said before, by having somebody else on the staff who takes care of the emotional tanks. Barbara Fredrickson at the University of North Carolina, both Mary Fry and Barbara are involved with PCA as our national advisory board. Her research on positivity is just unequivocal that positivity gets really good results. I once heard Al Gore speak when he was running for president. This was many years ago. And he used this example of, you're in this room with all this great food, all this wonderful art, this great music, and there's also a poisonous snake in the room. Where does your attention go? He was talking about nuclear proliferation at the time, but let's talk about it, that snake being negativity. When you've got a coach who could go off on you at any moment, where does your attention go? Are you able to enjoy the food? Are you able to enjoy the great works of art? No, you're constantly wondering, where is that snake? Where am I going to get bit? And that's I hope I didn't wishy-washy my answer to your question. There's just no research that shows breaking people down and building them up works. And I would guess some of you might be thinking, I don't know, I've seen coaches who do that and they're successful. Anybody question my strong statement about breaking them down, building them up, not working?
So that was an invitation for a follow-up question if anybody would like to.
I'm going to answer I'm going to ask her the question. Answer the question anyway. If you have more talented athletes than the other team, most of the time you're going to win. Not always. I mentioned about the Celtics winning with really very, very low talents level because Brad Stevens is such a great coach. And what happens is some coaches get into a situation where they have they have a pipeline of talent coming. And so they got lots and lots of really talented players coming. And, you know, if a bunch of those players get hurt either physically or emotionally, it's not a big deal to that coach because they got other people who want to compete. But that is also changing. You're finding now that players, high school players who have talent and have the ability to have a little leverage. A lot of high school players don't. They've got one shot. There's one place they can go. But if you have enough talent, you got multiple colleges recruiting you. Those athletes are looking for situations where they're going to be nurtured. And a good example, I'm a University of Oregon alum, and Mark Helfrich, just before the national championship game when unfortunately Ohio State beat Oregon, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal about how the Oregon coaches never yell at their players. So that was a long answer to a question nobody asked.
Right. Well, and then I will follow up with there's actually the I think the tweet link yesterday was about what if it looks like yelling is working. So it kind of is attached to the question that you asked yourself. But what happens? What's going on when it looks like a fiery coach? And actually, we've talked about the word passion here in this class about people excuse a lot of behavior because they're saying how passionate they are about the sport. But so what's going on when it looks like a coach that yells a lot or fiery coach who's actually being successful?
You're talking about successful on the scoreboard. They're winning games.
I lobbed that one to you. Thanks for hitting it out of the park. But go ahead and follow up on that.
Any of you seen the movie Whiplash yet? Okay. Here's what you should do, Rock, is assign 2 movies to your students. They should see McFarland USA and Whiplash on the same weekend. McFarland USA is a true story, based on a true story, about these little bitty Mexican-American kids in the agricultural center of California. They're playing football. They're getting the snot knocked out of them. And Kevin Costner, who's actually plays a role named Jim White, who's a real live person, comes there and gets them into running. It's one of the most inspiring movies I've ever seen. And then I went to see Whiplash, about this drummer who is in the most prestigious musical academy in the country, and his conductor is a brutalizer. And I don't want to say too much about it because it's a fantastic movie. Take music and drumming out of it and think of it as a sports movie, and it's exactly parallel. And I'm going to go back to the Nadia Comaneci. There are some people who are so tough, mentally tough, that they can handle it. There are also a lot of these coaches who are screaming play favorites. They tend to know which players, especially at a youth level. If you've got 1 or 2 really good baseball players, you've got a good pitcher. If you're playing basketball and you got 1 or 2 really good basketball players, those players can carry you. I think Phil Jackson and Doc Rivers, one of the reasons they are so good is because they get really great performance out of their 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 players. Their role players play better when they played for Phil Jackson and when they play for Doc Rivers than when they go to other teams.
Very good. Okay. Benjamin. Go ahead, nice and loud, please.
What advice would you add that you left out for coaches if you could rewrite the book?
I didn't quite catch that, Rob.
Okay, so what advice, if you got a chance to rewrite the book, and I warned you that we would ask you about the second edition. If you got to rewrite the book, what new advice would you give to youth sport coaches?
Yeah, I think a number of things. First book I wrote, I noticed you have the double coach there. First book I wrote is called Positive Coaching, Building Character and Self-Esteem Through Sports. I now, if I were going to write that book again, I would say developing character and self-confidence through sports, because self-esteem is an ephemeral issue. If you can help kids develop self-confidence, they're going to be successful in life. Self-esteem comes and goes. Oh, I feel good about myself, but self-confidence is really a key to success. And there are ways that great positive coaches build confidence in their players. I think I would be even more focused on relentless positivity than I was before. My first job was working with emotionally disturbed behavior problem kids in a school in St. Paul, Minnesota. These were kids whose behavior was so bad they had to be bused to a special school. And I was fortunate enough to get hired to be a teacher aide there, and I was trained in this the concept of relentless positivity. Everything those kids did positive, they got reinforced for, and they just blossomed. It's all about positive reinforcement. That gets the best results. So I would say I'd be even more focused on relentless positivity. After I met my wife at this school called the Behavioral Learning Center, we got married and went back to school and got our teaching degrees. 7 or 8 years later, I'm a student at the Stanford Business School. My son is playing sports, and I'm just appalled at how much negativity there is for these 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds playing sports. And I knew from my experience with the Behavioral Learning Center, these very troubled kids, that positivity worked with them. And I saw these kids who were very privileged. Their parents were Stanford employees, or they were working for high-tech companies, and the kids were not doing well in sports because I had a kid who had trouble hitting a tee off a tee because he was so nervous about his dad on him. Those two experiences really resulted ultimately in my starting Positive Coach Alliance. And then I ran across Barbara Fredrickson's research on positivity and Mary Fry's research. The research backs up my experience there. And then we have some of the best sports psychologists in the world involved. It's Charlie Marr, who's the Cleveland Indian sports psychologist, Ken Ravizza, who you know of Rock at Cal State Fullerton, who works with the Angels and the Rays. And what they say, what does negativity do to an athlete? It takes you out of the moment. It distracts you. Now, some people, like Nadia, some people are so mentally tough that they can just ignore their coach's negativity. But for the most part, negativity distracts you from what you're trying to do, and positivity leads to what Barbara Fredrickson calls, I love this term, an upward spiral. We talk about downward spirals. Positivity causes an upward spiral.
To kind of follow along with that, one of the concepts from PCA and the Federal Coach is this, it's part of the honoring the game pillar, is rivalry to be proud of. Can you give us like your 1 or 2 favorite examples of rivalries that have kind of risen to that level where they constantly make each other better?
Yeah, boy, there's all kinds of examples. I remember when Chris Everett and Martina Navratilova, yeah, when they were the top 2 tennis players in the world, they had incredible respect for each other. They were constantly, I think Martina actually ended up winning more of those, but Chris Everett held her own, and they made each other better. When runners are trying to break a record, they want pacers. They want either they want to run against somebody who's really, really good and is going to force them to run harder and to experience more pain than they want to experience, or they actually have jackrabbits. They'll have, if they're running, X number of laps, they'll have somebody run 2 or 3 laps at a fast pace and somebody else run 2 or 3 laps at a fast pace. I think, if you look back at the Lakers and the Celtics, in the glory days for those 2 franchises, they made each other better. Phil Jackson, when he was coaching the Bulls, in fact, some of you may have seen the ESPN 30 for 30 movie about the Bad Boys, the Detroit Pistons. They won the NBA title twice, and when the Bulls, Michael Jordan was a young player for the Chicago Bulls. And one of the things Phil Jackson said was that one of the reasons he's so big on honoring the game is because the Bad Boys, the Detroit Pistons, were distracting the Bulls. They were knocking them off their game mentally by, the tactics they used, and he had to get them to really focus on the game itself and honoring it. And Phil Jackson's he grew up like I did in North Dakota, and he's very steeped in Lakota Indian lore. And he said, what we call the Sioux or the Lakota, their arch rivals were the Crow Indians. And they realized that they had to respect the Crow, because if the Crow weren't there, they wouldn't have anybody to fight with. And the fighting and counting coup was a big part of their culture. And so once he was able to instill in the Bulls that the Detroit Pistons, as obnoxious as they might be, they're actually doing us a favor because they're forcing us to play even better in order to win. And of course, Pistons got their 2 years of winning, but then the Bulls went on to win 6 times.
From your own observations, how do people typically respond to the methods given in the double goal coach when trying to improve coaching skills? Do they take it easily, or is it something they have a hard time adjusting to?
I'll follow. So from your observation, how do people respond to the positive coaching message? Is it readily absorbed, or is it something that there's some resistance to?
There's definitely resistance to it. We have, coaching is often it's a ritual, tradition-bound way, and coaches have been, you watch Hoosiers, the movie, you watch Miracle about the 1984 USA hockey team. You got coaches who are, just being really, I think, obnoxious to their players sometimes, and that's kind of, that there's a belief that it makes, that causes people to get better by treating them really that way. What we find, though, is that the very best coaches typically are pretty positive. They focus on mastery, the kind of things that we talk about. And most parents do not want their kids abused. I remember my, Brenda Bredemeyer Rock, who's now at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. She done an and David Shields is her husband. That's right.
And David was with us about a month ago.
Yeah, so Brenda was at the University of California at Berkeley when PCA first got started, and she was a first board member. And our very first board meeting, we're talking about the goals of Positive Coaching Alliance, one of which was to get statistically valid evidence that positive coaching works better. And Paul Alexander, who was the chairman of our board initially, he's been our pro bono attorney for many, many years. His daughter played softball. She was starting shortstop at Harvard. She was the Ivy League co-player of the year. So Paul says, we're spending all this time talking about research and results, and pardon my French here, but he said, how much research, how much statistically valid research do you need to know that having some asshole screaming at your kid is not good for the kid?
And the answer to that is?
Not very much research. So the point is that parents generally do not like having their kids abused. Some parents are like, oh, I was coached this way and I'm a hard ass. But in general, parents are supportive. Leaders of organizations. That's why it's so important that we take a systems approach and not just work with coaches. Leaders of organizations, what are they worried about? Well, they're worried about kids dropping out so that they don't have enough money to continue the program. They're worried about parents attacking officials. They're worried about coaches driving kids away from sports. So, yeah, there are some coaches who are resistant to this, but the overall population of this country, the people who run youth sports organizations and high school sports leagues, the parents whose kids are there, and a lot of coaches as well, recognize this very quickly, that you get better results from coaching the way we encourage people to coach.
I'll follow up with that a little bit. Is actually, I've been on the road every weekend for like the last 6 weeks doing workshops in different places, and I want to back up what you're saying. Is that the leadership is very concerned about a lot of the issues that are addressed, because it's tough to run a program if nobody wants to coach, nobody wants to be an official, but everybody wants to have an opportunity for their children to play. And so having a positive organization has been very beneficial to them actually being able to do the work that they like to do. I think we've got time to open it up. Is there anybody else who would like to, from what you've heard today, like to ask a question to Mr. Thompson? Yeah, go ahead.
You're talking about Herb Brooks from Rudy American being like kind of a hard ass coach and like kind of pointless for some of the stuff that he was doing. Could you also factor in what was going on in the world as to why he was kind of so serious as to winning because of the other political stuff that was going on, and how like the severity of it would be if they did well when they actually did it?
Can you help me out, Rocky? I heard part of that, but not all of it.
So you mentioned Herb Brooks, and we're asking if there is some current events things that might have also gone into the way that he was portrayed, about the way that he interacted with his athletes, and that there were bigger ramifications besides just that particular game. Yeah.
Yeah. The couple things. First of all, I'm not at all sure that Herb Brooks coached the way he was portrayed in that movie. I think the players who played for him really looked up to him, and he has a really good reputation. So I'm not gonna. When people make movies about sport and coaches, the tendency is to make the coaches out to be kind of jerks, and the kids eventually realize the coach is right. And I think Return of the Titans. Remember the Titans is an example of that. Denzel Washington was the star, so he had to be right in it. And I think there's a moment in McFarland USA. I can't recommend this movie highly enough. There's a moment in that where Kevin Costner, the coach, says, "I think I'm not hard enough on the players." And I'm thinking, oh no, he's going to go negative. And then he doesn't, and he has amazing results. If I had to summarize the central lesson of sports psychology, listen up. This is important, and your professor can
put it on the test.
The central lesson of sports psychology is focus on what you can control and ignore what you can't control. All the stuff we talk about in sports psychology comes down to that. And it's a very simple idea. It's not easy to do. And I think, Cameron, your question is like you're talking about, this is the United States hockey team, and we're representing the whole country, and the pressure on that coach, the pressure on those players is immense. I have a friend who was, she's the associate dean of religious life at Stanford. She was a college tennis coach and a college tennis player, and she was a chaplain at the when was the Salt Lake City Olympics? Is that 1980?
2002.
2002. Yeah, okay. She was a chaplain there, and she came back and she said, "You would not believe how many attempted suicides there are at the Olympics, because especially, you make the Olympic team, and then now everybody in your hometown, everybody in your school, all the people are pulling for you, and while they're pulling for you, they're also putting pressure on you. But, oh my God, I can't, what if now if nobody expects anything from you, that's a good place to be, and then you come in 7th, wow, that's great, or if you win a bronze medal. But when the pressure is there, that simple lesson from sports psychology is not at all easy. I cannot control all of these other things. What I can control is how, and this goes back to our elm tree of mastery. I can control, ELM stands for E for effort, L for learning, M for mistakes, bouncing back from mistakes. I can control my effort. I can keep working hard no matter what. I can control how much I learn. Things are not going well, but I'm going to keep learning and get better. And I can develop the mental toughness to be able to bounce back from mistakes. The greatest players are, I heard an interview with David Foster Wallace, who was fantastic writer. Unfortunately, he committed suicide way, way too early. Like all these books that he never got a chance to write. Well, he was interviewed by Terry Gross on Fresh Air on NPR once, and she said, "Oh, you were a champion tennis player when you were a kid." He said, "No, I wasn't a champion tennis player. I was a really good regional tennis player." And then he went on to talk about how great players have this muscle in their brain, and that muscle pushes out any distraction, and so they can totally focus on the play. Most of us don't have that. We develop that muscle if we stay in sports and we use sports psychology ideas. If we develop a mistake ritual like flushing mistakes or no stop, whatever. If we develop positive self-talk to replace our negative self-talk when we make a mistake, we can develop that muscle so that we can be mentally tough enough to be able to focus on the pressure and then to not lose it. When people say, "Oh, he's a tough coach," toughness is not losing your temper and blasting people. Any 4-year-old can do that. They lose control. Mental toughness really is the kind of thing I mentioned about Lindsay Gottlieb, not yelling at the coach, Fred Hoiberg being positive when they're 17 points down. That is really mental toughness. And I'm not sure I answered your question, but I talked for a long time, Kevin.
But with that, I believe that it's time for us to thank you for being with us today. And we're going to wrap up the broadcast. Again, thank you. Again,
my pleasure. Rock, always
you
pleasure.
have a lot of day left there in California. I hope it's a great day for you. And again, thanks for being with us.
Okay, take care now.
Class dismissed.